Indeed. Okay.
The viewpoints expressed in this program are the opinions of the people expressing them and are not necessarily those of Fresh Air Incorporated, its staff, or its board of directors.
Hi, this is Al McFarlane, host of the Conversation with Al McFarlane. You're listening to 98.3 FM, KFAI, Minneapolis. Al McFarlane, welcome to the Conversation with Al McFarlane. Today's a special day, the first in a series of programs live from George Floyd Square in South Minneapolis. Why are we here? We're here because we want to commemorate, to acknowledge, to build on the energy towards freedom and liberation, towards clarity, towards justice, towards accountability in our community. Between the institutions that serve us and our people, between each other as well. So we're glad to be here. We want to take a minute to tell you that the regular programming today on KFAI Mini Culture returns next week. We're going to be doing live from George Floyd Square every day this week. I think the Thursday program might not be broadcast, but it will be live streamed. And then special, for the first time ever, we're going to be doing a Saturday program, Saturday at 1 o'clock, live from George Floyd Square, right here from Listen to Us Studio. What a name. How appropriate is that? We're at Listen to Us Studio in South Minneapolis. You're going to meet the proprietor of the studio, a masterful photographer who's documented the energy and the events surrounding the insurrection, the rebellion, the uprising in our community. Over the week, we hope to talk to a lot of people about George Floyd, both here and around the world. Today, we're going to be joined by Reverend Dr. Thomas Nins, who used to live here in St. Paul, but is out east now, and asking him to sort of set the program in motion today, setting an intention of why and how we should contemplate, we should think about, we should meditate, reflect on what has happened and what must happen. Today also, I'm pleased to have right here at Listen to a Studio, two dear friends and guests and leaders in community. One is Chantel Allen. She is the founder of Black Lives Minnesota. She'll talk about the role they played here and around the world in bringing awareness, demanding, pursuing justice for our people. And also here is my friend Rosemary Williams. You might have seen her on the cover of Inside News a couple of weeks ago. We were reporting on her 80th, I think, birthday. Was it 80th birthday?
Push me down to L, 75th.
75th, okay, sorry. Well, I said that because, this weekend, I was over at Bill English's birthday. Bill English, our friend, was celebrating 90th birthday.
Yeah.
So that just inspires us and encourages us, lets us know we got a lot more work to do and a lot more giving to give and a lot more getting to get as well. Well, with that, I want to invite you who are joining us on any of the social media platforms. You may be connecting on YouTube. We're on two platforms, Black Press USA and YouTube Inside News MN. We use the MN for our bean counting purposes, so we'd love to have you become a subscriber. Doesn't cost you anything, but it gets you notified when we go live every day. And then we're also streaming on 3 Facebook platforms. We're streaming on LinkedIn, and we're streaming on X, Twitter. Wherever you are, however you're connecting, we appreciate you take a minute and call somebody, tweet to somebody, post to somebody that we're having this conversation now, today, live from George Floyd Square in South Minneapolis. This is ground zero for the revolution that's underway. This is ground zero for the reckoning that is underway. This is ground zero, and we are here with you and for you. We want you to be connected. This is about healing at the end of the day. How do we heal ourselves, our families, our communities, society as well? And how does the tragedy, the horror of the murder of George Floyd call us to attention and call us to service? Today, we also have the special fun of having my brother, Wayne McFarlane. This is sort of a throwback to when we started doing this show years ago over in North Minneapolis at Lucille's Kitchen. And we would have the public policy forum with live music opening up. And so Wayne is here today. Over the week, probably some other musicians will drop in and talk about what they're doing. So let me begin by, also I mentioned that one of our guests today is Dr. Reverend Benjamin F. Chavis Jr. He's the head of the Black Press of America. He's the CEO and president of National Newspaper Publishers Association, and obviously speaking on behalf of our information infrastructure, the Black Press of America. We're going to meditate and talk about George Floyd, what it means and where we go. But let me begin by asking Reverend Dr. Thomas Nins, welcome you to the program, brother. Good to see you. Thank you for stepping up and stepping in. And I wanted to just start with you to sort of set an intention out of your heart, out of your mind. I'll give your background a little later, but let's start the program with your thoughts.
So thank you for having me. I want to send appreciation to my family, to friends across the country for supporting me in this. And I want to honor the guests who are here, who have been in the struggle for a long time. And really, that's what brings us to this moment, right? The struggle continues. And the struggle was manifested in a way that it had never been manifested, perhaps since the Civil Rights Movement, where we discovered how powerful the media was in presenting what was going on in the South. There had been so many times and so many clips and so many visuals and so many conversations of the atrocities that happened in the Black community. But with George Floyd, that image, the image of that man with his knee on his neck, no one could turn from that. No one could refute that. It was irrefutable. And so it lays the groundwork for us now, what we're doing and what we hope to do.
Reverend Nins was born in Chicago. He grew up in St. Paul and then Minneapolis. Has a BA in broadcast journalism from Virginia Union in Richmond, Virginia. Master's of Divinity from the School of Theology at Virginia Union, and he completed his postgraduate studies at Duke University with an honorary doctorate of divinity degree from Eastern Theological Seminary in Lynchburg, Virginia. He went on to earn doctor of ministry degree at New York Theological Seminary, and his thesis was on leadership development in the African American community of Lower Fairfield, Connecticut. Well, brother Dr. Nins, what is the consequence? What should we be saying and thinking as a community and as families about not only the horror, the horrific incident, but what healing must we be responsible for coming out of that?
It's an excellent question, and I don't know that there is a single answer. I think that we should feel however we feel about this experience. I think that we should think however we think about what we saw, and I think we should hold on to whatever hope gets us through the day. I am a grandfather now, grandfather of two beautiful children. One is a boy. So I recognize that I and my son, who lives and works in the Twin Cities, we have to talk to Ahmaud the same way I talk to Kellen, the same way my father talked to me about how a Black man survives day by day in the United States of America. And so there's a part of me that is grateful for the knowledge that I've gained. And there's a part of me that's sad that I have to share with Ahmaud at some point what he needs to know in order just to make it through each day.
You wrote a piece. Share some of that. You have it handy.
I
Where
did.
go ahead and share that piece, and I'm going to bring in Dr. Chavis.
Okay. This is entitled, Just How Black Must I Be? And I wrote it in honor of this coming week, this event. Just how black must I be? Just how black must I be before you open your eyes and really see me? How black before the ignorance you store in secret spaces behind shiny badges and smiling faces ruins innocent lives no more? Just how black must I be? How black must I be before you acknowledge my gifts beyond basketball courts and fields of dreams? How black before you surrender your stereotypes, face your fears, and harness your hate? How long before you recognize the same sun shines on me? Before you arrived, I was already here. Before you could read, I was mapping the stars with advanced math and astronomy. I was here when the first bird flew and the first song sung. When you finally discovered directions, we were already carving paths, rewriting our futures in spite of our past, building great nations to the beat of the drum. From Mississippi, we came. Alabama, we came. Gary and Chicago, we came. To the land you stole and the right you claimed that never was your right at all. Did you see me in college, mastering arts, learning knowledge, doing my part? Did you see me go down in your unholy wars, fighting strangers, dying sailors, frontline soldiers, and the Marine Corps? Just how black must I really be? St. Paul, Minneapolis, your hope rises in my spirit. Your blood flows through me, wondering just how black we must really be. Can't you hear me? Don't you see me beyond the negative images and misleading lyrics? One people, many versions, no niggas out here. 3 words shook the planet. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. Just how black must I be?
It's nice.
It means everything to me. The turn of the way it used to be. We found peace in love. We found a way from above. Now we wonder with love, how long shall we wait? Return of the King.
You know, we do this thing where Wayne promised me years and years ago, Al, if you can read it, I can sing it, right? And so I loved working with Wayne. We would play, and at that, we were at Lucille's Kitchen in North Minneapolis on September 11th, 1990, whatever it was, 9/11, when the towers came down. And I think Roger Gunvier was our guest on the program that day. And we were both doing this public policy program, but also watching the towers come down. And Wayne and Gunberry got up and sung something, I think some Bob Marley, either Exodus or one of the songs. But we worked this together. So Wayne, thank you for being here. And over the course of the hour and over the course of the week, Wayne and some friends will join to create the flavor. Chantel, let me bring you in first, and then we're going to bring in Dr. Benjamin Chavis. Chantel Allen is a organizer, a communicator, a worker, an activist in community, and she's one of the founders of Black Lives Matter Minnesota. Welcome to the conversation, and thank you for welcoming us to George Floyd Square.
Absolutely. Thank you.
What's on your mind?
I mean, some years have passed as a policymaker and a policy advocate. You know, I am a little frustrated with where we're at around qualified immunity and some of these other policies that we feel like we could move in order to preserve folks' humanity in the midst of policing our communities, right? And you know, there was this movement coming out of Minnesota to abolish the police department, which, you know, I personally am not a huge fan of immediate abolish, but I do know that the system of policing is put here in our communities to specifically oppress us. And as long as it exists, we're going to have to continue to talk about what you're bringing up today, which is healing. And so it seems counterproductive, right, to continue to have these institutions or these agencies amongst us. We have to start to work towards shaping our society in a way. And that's where I think the healing comes in. It's the restorative justice. It's the healing from past traumas. It's us learning how to work better together amongst one another and how to help support each other through economic crisis, right? So that we're not in the struggle and getting criminalized. And in that process, we start to decrease the need for police. We start to get to a place where we can say, take that money and put it into this, because we don't have those kind of problems in our community anymore. We've learned to work together. We've learned to resolve issues. We've learned to be more loving to one another, right? And so it's a big work. It's how do we hold the police departments accountable so that they're not just coming into our communities and terrorizing us, which further the work of healing, right? Furthers the work that we need to do around healing. And then how do we continue to heal ourselves so that we don't need the police to even be in our communities or in our personal business at all in the process? And so those are some of the things that I think about day to day, some of the works that I feel necessary to work on, whether it's, you know, community programs and that. And then, you know, I'm also on the St. Paul School Board trying to end the school to prison pipeline. And so taking down particular institutions that perpetuate that level of criminalization in our communities.
I'm Al McFarlane. This is the Conversation with Al McFarlane. We're broadcasting live. We call this George Floyd Week. And I want to say thank you to radio station KFAI for preempting programs all week this week for us to do live broadcasts from George Floyd Square. Let me also remind you to tell somebody, get your tweet on, your post on, whatever you do, but let somebody know that we're having this conversation right now. Dr. Benjamin Chavis is here. Dr. Ben, how you doing?
I'm doing fine, Brother Al, and to Reverend Dr. Nims and to Sister Allen. You know, I think that this is a sacred moment. Mm-hmm. I think where you are in George Floyd Square, that's a sacred square. Why do I say that? Is because out of what happened there and the tragedy of George Floyd's murder and the subsequent uprising, the subsequent prosecution, the subsequent imprisonment of one of the perpetrators, the main perpetrator of the murder. But more than that, it's the movement that was birthed out of it. And I think part of, you asked what contributes to healing, one thing that helps sustain healing is remembrance. Lest we not forget what happened to George Floyd. Not only the fact that he was murdered, but how he was murdered. And what he screamed out as he was being murdered. It touched the soul, the spirit of people, not just in America, but all over the world. And we dare not lose memory as we seek healing.
You know, in thinking about this, Dr. Ben, and thinking about this, I remember where I was exactly on November 22nd, I think it was 1963. I remember where I was exactly on April 4th, 68. And so these events, I mentioned earlier, 9/11, right? These events are indelibly printed in our personal and in the global mind of humanity. And I think that the murder of George Floyd is such an event, almost even more so, it marks a true inflection point that I think is global in nature. And so how do you assess this moment in terms of the change that we've been fighting for? We have finally pulled the mask off, the mask of civility. We didn't pull it off. They showed themselves in a way. We happen to have the courage and the life and energy of young women to document the viciousness and the evil that we experience too often all over the country and maybe around the world because we are Black. But now we saw it, and the whole world had to see it too. The whole world was watching and is watching. What does it mean as an inflection point, Dr. Ben?
Well, one of the reasons why it was an inflection point was not only the horror of it, but how it was captured on media, how it was transported via media, various formats. Keep in mind, in 1963 and 1968, we did not have social media.
Nope.
But we have it now, and we have technology that has connected people all over the world. But I would also say, to be very honest, Al and Reverend Nims and Sister Allen, Americans in general don't focus for a long period of time on anything. And so we must always remind not only Black America, but all Americans of what happened to George Floyd and what are the consequences, because we still have not passed the George Floyd anti-police legislation, police brutality legislation in Congress. Still hasn't passed. And right now, as you recall, in the wake of George Floyd's murder, most of corporate America were rushing to establish DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, persons. A lot of people became vice president of DEI. Well, all that's been erased now. Corporate America has pulled back from its momentary responsiveness to Black Lives Matter, its momentary responsiveness. And that's why I just want to drill down a moment, Al.
Yeah, go ahead.
Not only what we remember, but as a result of what we remember, how we have to continue to fight, how we have for liberation, how we continue to articulate. And we dare not let the forces of oppression determine what the narrative is or the timing of the narrative. That's our responsibility. United Nations has said the most fundamental human right is the right of self-determination. And I think that the brothers and sisters there in Minneapolis, right there in George Floyd Square, the radio show that you're doing, the work that the pastor, the work that the sisters doing in Black Lives, are all vital. And we need a responsiveness from our own community. Because part of what we do in the Black press is not only to report the news, but we are an advocate for freedom, justice, and equality.
Chantel, I hear you high-signing or saying, what's your thought?
I mean, I think there was a lot of thoughts that went through my head. There was, going back to what you were saying about in 1963 and how they were able to broadcast on the TV. And so there was this new wave of social media. And that was something, a lot of people think that this just erupted out of nowhere, but there had been a lot of strong organizers and activists on the ground since 2014 in Minnesota, shutting down airports and Mall of America and really making serious demands and working together to bring this point and get to this point. And when we think about why that young lady pulled out her phone so brave, it comes from all of the organizers previously here in this area that started to educate folks on how powerful social media can be, how powerful it can be to tell our own stories, tell our own narratives. We're here in Listen Media studios with King Demetrius, and he was one of the independent media folks that had been on the ground since 2015, really telling our stories when we were dismissing all other media outlets out of our spaces, out of our protests, so that we could tell our own story. And so when I think about, what Dr. Chavis is saying, it is vital. Our response is vital. And it's vital that we continue to stay evolutionary in how we do it. And so we saw that this was a tool that was beautiful for this very moment. But as things move, how do we incorporate the next level of movement? And I believe in young people, which is why I'm on the school board, and I want to influence our public school systems to educate our young people, because I think that there's another wave that's coming right behind us. And not that we're done with what we're doing right here, but like you said, people are starting to pull back. We can put the pressure on and we can start to, make things happen, but there's another really strong wave coming right behind us, and I'm excited for it. And so that's what I think about when I hear you guys talking. It's all adding up to exactly what God is calling to happen, a real reckoning.
One of our colleagues on the line is joining us from Brazil. Yoji Senna is a regular and a member of my team. He's the editor of Afrodescendientes, which is a multilingual section of Inside News. But Yoji lived here in this neighborhood. Yoji, good afternoon. Welcome again to the conversation. Let's bring you in, because it just surprised me when you told me you described yourself as a George Floyd refugee. What does that mean? And how did you know George Floyd? How do you know this community that we're broadcasting from right now, community now known as, now declared to be George Floyd Square?
Yeah, greetings everybody. Good afternoon from Brazil. Yeah, I used to live on Oakland and between 37 and 38. From the window of my room and living room, I could see cup foods. So I am a long time, used to be a long time resident of South Minneapolis. Most of the time of the 32 years that I lived in Minneapolis, I lived in South Minneapolis. And I knew George Floyd from he being working El Nuevo Rodeo. That is, I don't know if it's still open, a restaurant owned by one of my ex-students, Maya Santa Maria. So we would, cross path also around the neighborhood. And I was a usual frequenter of cup foods where I would buy, sandwiches or little things that you buy in a grocery store. So it was the closest one to my house. And I call myself a George Floyd refugee because um, up until uh, the event of his death, I didn't. It was not in my mind ever to return to live here in Brazil. And his death coincided with the pandemic. And after his death, the neighborhood took a different configuration. They blocked the entrances. There was gunshots every night. And since I am a guardian of my son, uh, that situation was upsetting him greatly. Put him in a mind situation that was not favorable. So, and along with the pandemic, I did panic, and my like reaction thought was, if I have to die, I better die where I was born. And with the help of my other son, we started travel through the U.S. Originally was our plan to come in a bus up to here, but it broke in Colorado. I ended up going to California for 1 or 2 months, and then I fly back home. Was very impactant to me to see that happening. And here in Brazil, when I mentioned that I come from Minneapolis, that me and my son moved here from Minneapolis, the immediate association is George Floyd. So like a household name that every regular person uh, knows. Uh, people with low income, people with education, militants of the black movement here, the Uber driver, the attendant in the bar. Everybody knows what happened to George Floyd. So Minneapolis became a household name in Brazil, and I believe also around the world. Because there was such a publicity that was given that it's, like I mentioned, this week is the fourth year anniversary of his death, of George Floyd. Everybody knows what it is. Even some people remember Chauvin name, but George Floyd is a household name in Brazil too.
Let me ask Dr. Nins and Benjamin Chavis and Chantel to reflect on the global impact as you see it. Doctor, from your work in the ministry, what are we called to do as human beings when we are presented with things we cannot look away from? What is the opportunity here? Ben, as communicators, Dr. Ben, as communicators, how does this move us into more cooperation and collaboration, not only nationally, but globally? And that talks to the fact that we did not have as extensive connectability as we have now due to social media, but it's not inconsistent with the massive role that we have always played as the Black press of America, and is what's developing the Black press of the world in a way that connects us globally. And then Chantel, your part of the question is, what about companies and institutions that came with major commitments, major pronouncements of investment in doing the right thing, but they've gone silent. And in fact, what's happened instead is a consistent and steady disembowelment of what we thought was the proper thing, the proper response of DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Dr. Nins, first you.
Right. That was a whole lot of words. So let me say this, and Dr. Chavis, it's an honor to be here with you, man. You've been on the journey for a while.
Thank you.
And even if you didn't pledge alpha, I have love for you. Great love for you. So connecting to what our brother from Brazil said in order to respond, it could be argued that Minneapolis was really known for Prince, Sounds of Blackness, and for those of us who live and die with the Minnesota Vikings every year. Outside of the area, beyond this Midwest area, no one's thinking about the challenge or the struggles or the success of Black people in the Twin Cities unless they are directly connected to it. So with George Floyd, when my brother talks about how it's known in Brazil, all of a sudden it's global. All of a sudden people are like, I didn't know that. I didn't know that they had struggles there. I didn't know that there was conflict with law enforcement there. I walked these streets. I played in these streets. I grew up in these streets. Challenges between the community and law enforcement are not new. I need to say that for the viewer. This is not new, but the brutality, the arrogance of the action that's put in the media, that was in view for everyone to see. So what do we do? How do we respond? Where should we go from here? I think we should be mindful of what the sister said earlier. And I was so proud and pleased to hear her say it. There's a distinction between being a revolutionary and an evolutionary. And an evolutionary remains current, remains consistent with a specific platform and agenda, but is open to ways to evolve and to bring on new ways to achieve similar goals. I think we should all be evolutionaries. I think we should all be revolutionary in our spirit. By that, I mean, take a look at how we got here. Don't just Google Dr. Chavis and look at him now. Look at the path that he took to help us get to where we are right now. Because the brother was out in the streets. This era, they understand Al Sharpton because you see Al on TV. God bless Al. Brother Chavis was out there. There are so many people who were out there paving the way for what we're going to do. We don't have to reinvent revolution. We don't have to recreate it. What we have to do is learn from it and then decipher, how do we do it now? What do we do now in order to achieve the goals that we're talking about?
Very good.
I'm Al McFarlane. This is the Conversation with Al McFarlane. We're broadcasting live from George Floyd Square in South Minneapolis. And if you are driving around and drop in, we're here at Listen to Us Studio at 3730 Chicago Avenue South. We're right here in the heart of George Floyd Square. Dr. Ben, go ahead.
Yes. You asked a very complex question, Al. And I'm going to join my remarks with what Reverend Nims just said in terms of understanding the importance of grassroots struggle. You know, no national movement is any stronger than its grassroots base. And I think that one of the things we learned about the success of the Black Lives Matter movement after George Floyd was how it was able to connect brothers and sisters from all walks of life. Some for who first time joined the movement, and then others who were veterans of the movement. I think that we should learn from the past. And I want to say to Brother Yogi, muito bem, obrigado. I spent a lot of time in Angola, which is Portuguese speaking, and I've done some work in Brazil. I do think.
And your last name is Portuguese.
I know. It means key. I know.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, you know,
Cabo Verdean.
Portugal was one of the major enslavers in the transatlantic slave trade, and blessed by the Catholic Church of all places. But that's another matter. We're coming out with a book later this year on the transatlantic slave trade that tries to correct some of the inaccurate narratives out there as people try to play down what happened in the transatlantic slave trade. But moving forward, Al, this is the 197th year of the Black press in America. And from the days of, when Freedom's Journal first started, then what Frederick Douglass did, the North Star on up, Du Bois, Ida B. Wells. I mean, I just go down the list. But also, we are connecting now with the Black press internationally, globally. And we are looking forward to making these connections, not just for the moment. I think when Reverend Nims said that the struggle continues, well, that is the exact meaning of a luta continua. Victoria is certain. Victory is certain. To the extent to which we continue our struggle. We don't, there will always be moments of peaks and moments of low, but we have to be consistent in our organizing and our mobilizing and our struggle out to keep the definition of the narrative, our narrative, in our own hands. Because one of the challenges of social media is that on the one hand, it's been very beneficial to connect people, but on the other hand, there's so many inaccuracies. There's so many stereotypes. There's so many things that try to even make people be hopeless rather than to give them hope. And the job of all movements, whether they're evolutionary or revolutionary, at the end of the day, you not only have to be committed to what we're fighting for, but we have to have the aspiration, the hope, knowing that our fight and our struggle is not in vain. So at the George Floyd Square, we know that what happened there is not in vain. And so out of the George Floyd Square, we should be touching squares all over the Pan-African world.
You know, Dr. Nins was letting us know that isn't something you've just arrived at, this work, that you've been at the forefront of the struggle. Take us, if you would, just 2 minutes or a minute in your personal history of the struggle and the high points as you see it, Dr.
Well, thank
Ben.
you. That's another complex question. I'll try to stay within that time limit. I'm from Oxford, North Carolina. I was born in 1948. My great-great-great-great-grandfather was the Reverend John Chavis, the first brother to be ordained as a Presbyterian minister in America. And after the Nat Turner insurrection in the early 1830s, my grandfather, great-great-great-grandfather, was beaten to death because he organized an underground school for enslaved African children. And so I come out of a tradition of ministers, educators, a few physicians here and there. So when I was growing up in Oxford, North Carolina, I knew the definition of racism and racial oppression when I was at the first grade. And my only reluctance, I didn't join the movement until I was 12. If people ask him, Ben, what would you do over again? I should have joined at 5 and 6. Because the earlier you join the movement, it kind of grows on you. And that doesn't mean you have to do the same thing every year. You learn and you progress, you adapt, not accept, adapt to change things. And so I became the youngest person working on Dr. King's staff, Southern Christian Leadership Conference. Then I became with the United Church of Christ Commission for Racial Justice, was led to the Wilmington 10. I spent most of the 1970s in prison as a political prisoner as a Wilmington 10, but never gave up the struggle because while we were in prison, we organized, just like we were before we came to prison. Never let a hardship break your spirit. Never let a disappointment break your spirit. Never let the evils of others break your spirit. And that has been sort of my lesson. I've been pleased for the last 11 years to be the CEO of the National Newspaper Publishers Association. And I'm so proud of the Black press. My job has helped them keep sustainable, relevant, not only in America, but throughout the world.
What should businesses be doing? What should we be doing to get the revenue streams associated with our numbers, our purchasing power, and how does all that tie into this question of movement? What are the economics of the movement, Dr. Ben?
Yes, well, I think that everybody quotes the figure that African Americans on a 12-month basis spend now almost $2 trillion. We're spenders, we're consumers, but we need to leverage our consumership. We need to leverage our spending. And quite frankly, I think more brothers need to go into the productive end of the economy and not just the consumer end. And this is also globally. I think there are a lot of joint ventures now between Africans and African Americans, African Caribbeans, African Brazilians, throughout the Pan-African world. I think is very encouraging. But the larger question that I think you're asking is that we should not left, like in Minneapolis, I'm gonna be very, very point.
Yeah.
Minneapolis is the home base of Target. Minneapolis is the home base of Home Depot. Minneapolis is the home base of General Mills and other major Fortune 500 companies. But a number of those Fortune 500 companies do not return an investment back into the communities in which provide them their profits. And it seems to me the George Floyd Square and all the businesses at George Floyd Square ought to get a lot of support, financial support, from these major corporations in Minnesota. Because it's one thing to get a corporation based in another state or another country, but what's happening locally? I tell people all the time, if you want to have an effective struggle, you better make sure that that struggle is in the community and where we live, where we work, where we worship, where we have impact. The strongest movement is always at the grassroots level.
Chantel, jump in here if you would, just as well as that apply to the question I asked you, but just want to build on it.
Yeah, I mean, he has a really good point about those major corporations. Cargill is another one. And something that I've been working on over the last year is trying to eliminate the slavery language out of our state constitution and really target it in on General Mills and Cargill, which are two major corporations that currently practice slavery in America. They currently have plantations that folks from prisons work on for pennies on the dollar. And so I think that it comes down to holding them accountable. And when I think about all of those folks kind of backtracking, a lot of times I just go, your day is going to come. Because the reality is that whether you're currently practicing slavery or not, and a lot of them were doing that based on the George Floyd, on the current situation. But when we look at all of these major corporations, they are all linked back to slavery. They're all linked back to a plantation, linked back to something. And so their day is going to come. We can ask them now to give us pennies, change, because, you know, few $1 million, $7, $8, $9 million, that's change compared to what they owe us. And so they can either step to the table right now and say, hey, we're going to try to make amends, or they can continue to show themselves, which is how I see it. They're showing themselves because their day is going to come, and we will get reparations as Black people in America. And all of those corporations will be held accountable for that. And so that's how I see it.
So as they show themselves, how do we show ourselves, Chantel?
We've got to get organized. You know, I think it's time for, and I've been talking with other folks, businesses and organizations and stuff about how do we come together at a table and then really hold them accountable and say, hey, look, we're going to start to either call boycotts on your businesses, or we're going to start to really hold you accountable. Because as you said, we spend what, $12 trillion a year? Is that what you said? That's a ridiculous amount of money. You know, if we're spending that kind of money, we should be leveraging that kind of power behind it. And so being able to say, we will call boycotts, and we will avoid Target. We will avoid General Mills. We will avoid these major corporations that are continuing to backslide on their, really, they owe it to us currently anyway, just based on the fact that they didn't let us into their corporations. Even if we look in the last 100 years, when these corporations are, you know, forming themselves, and how they pushed us out, kept us out. We had to have affirmative action, and they still played us in the process. So there's a lot of reasons why just recently they owe us money. But if we go all the way back 400 years, we'll find that they're directly tied to the cotton or the indigo or the wheat or the tobacco, or the, you know what I mean? They're directly connected.
Al, can I add something to this?
Go ahead.
Okay, so I like what you said, and it's important. And what I want to add to it, and I would love to hear from the other panelists, there's two meetings. There's always at least two meetings. One meeting you see us most frequently, and that's at 8 o'clock. And that's where we're angry, and that's where we're boycotting, and that's where we're picketing, and that's where we're expressing ourselves passionately about what we believe. And there's the 7 o'clock meeting. And at the 7 o'clock meeting, that's where the decisions are being made. And so in the process of organizing, all I wanted to say to that, all I want to add to that and hear from the wisdom among you, we need to train, teach members of our community how to navigate the 7 o'clock meeting, because that's a whole different dynamic. It's a whole, you know, it's not like what we do on a regular, we sit around and we're talking and we're joking, and the meeting might, you know, 45 minutes, we still haven't met yet. We fellowship. We're good fellowshippers. But where the power really rests, where the decisions are actually made, that's a unique skill set. That's something that I'm just adding to the conversation to get your reflection on it. How significant is that?
It's very significant. As we say in the movement, you're either at the table where the decisions have been made, or you're on the menu where decisions are made. And so there are consequences for being at the 7 o'clock meeting, and there are consequences for being at the 8 o'clock meeting. And I would say there's a third category, Reverend. Mm-hmm. Some of us don't go in the meeting. Mm-hmm. We become alienated to one another. Mm-hmm. You know, our sense of community, our sense of family, our sense of brotherhood, sisterhood, all these things have to be replenished from one generation to another. It doesn't come by osmosis. It comes by interactions, building the relationships. One of the things that has happened over the last several years since George Floyd, you know, is the term intersection. how do we intersect with one another in an affirmative way, not in a fearful way. So even if we come to the 7 o'clock meeting, before we get to the 7 o'clock meeting, we need to huddle. So while we're at the table, we ain't fighting one another. But we come to the table in unity.
Yes, sir.
That's the organizing part.
I'm Al McFarlane. This is the Conversation with Al McFarlane. We're broadcasting live from George Floyd Square. We're at Listen to Us Studio, the home of photographer, artist King Demetrius Pendleton. Drop by 3730 Chicago Avenue South. We'll be here every day this week doing our show live, and we have a lot of people lined up that you want to interact with, connect with. If you're listening anywhere and want to add a comment or join the conversation, do that. Thanks to Michelle. She's a regular listener. And if you are on any of the other platforms, just Remnant Girl, thank you for being here. Let us know who you are, where you are. We'd be glad to shout you out, get a question to one of our panelists. We'd like to have that as well. I'm going to talk to Rosemary Williams in just a second and turn the conversation a little bit, because Rosemary is a sister who celebrated her 75th birthday just recently, but also is a mother who lost her child to gun violence. And as we talk about the violence visited on George Floyd, we have to also talk about the violence that we visit on each other as well. We'll hear about that in just a minute. Wayne, give us a 20-second interlude, if you would.
The world is now. What are we all waiting for? Time waits for no one. You must stand for what's right. All the children of the world, you should not shed no blood tonight. Can't you see what the government do? How they make their case? You may say peace to me, I may say assalamu alaikum too. The world is now. What are we all waiting for? The world is now. What are we all waiting for? More bloodshed? No, it cannot be. It cannot be.
The world is now. What a powerful message. Thank you, Wayne. Rosemary Williams is here. Rosemary is a friend, a dear friend. Her family's a friend. And she's been an organizer and an entrepreneur and a counselor, advisor, an organizer of the civic and social networks in our community. Rosemary, happy birthday to you again. Good to see you. If you want to go back to about 2 weeks ago, you see a marvelous portrait of her on the cover of Insight News at a birthday party, a story written by our reporter, Azania Little. Rosemary, how are you?
I'm blessed, thank you, and greetings and peace to all of you out there in Radio Land. And thank you, Al, for allowing us to do this. Lucille was so powerful for our community, and we need that again. The communication is a big thing. One thing came to my mind when I was listening to the brothers speak was, this is kind of like not kind of, but it is the rebirth of the civil rights movement, but it's moved into social justice now. Yes. And we have all these youth that want to be involved. And because of the internet, it's so easy to connect them. And that's why all those young folks showed out for this whole piece, not only in the Twin Cities, but around the world. It's so important that we bring our youth in with us. I heard a young lady make a statement the other day in a restaurant that the elders aren't willing to turn over the gavel, what have you. And I said, sis, you need that, so we need you. You have the energy and time that I don't have, And so I really want us to go forward and engage our youth more, because they're willing, they're ready, and they're able. And we're so able to connect with them now. Like you said, before it was television, that was a whole nother dimension. Now you hit these computers in a couple of minutes and you have 100 people on the corner. So let us do that, all of us that are out here still in the movement and still working. And we have to keep emphasizing education to our youth. So many of our children are no longer in school. And when we were coming to the 60s, everybody, even the alcoholics, get in school, girl. You got to get that knowledge. That's the only thing they can't take away from you. And that was the word. And so a lot of us went forth and were educated because of that. We've got to say that again, but include the youth. They're most important to this movement as far as I'm concerned. I'm 75. I'm not going to be around that many more years, and I'm not willing to march like I used to because my body won't let me. But our youth are here, and let's use them to be a part of this movement. Let's give them the information they need. There's leadership amongst them. Let's recognize that and give them the education. We used to do Saturday classes. We used to have a Sealy Institute, Oak Park in North Minneapolis. People just show up at 10 o'clock in the morning. Sometimes Jawans and Coop will be in town, or sometimes nobody be in town. But we come together, we talk, we figure out how we're going to make things work and how we're going to make our community go forward and not stand still. They've dropped this fentanyl on our children now, high school children. Half of them almost are drugged out now. What can we do with young folks that are drugged out? Their brains are fried. So we got to pull them back to us and away from these cartels that are helping the U.S. government take them down.
Your son was killed. You and I were all together, and your daughter Aisha, in Ghana several years ago during one of the Panafest events. What a wonderful occasion! But the last time I talked to your son, he said, "Al, we have to go back to Ghana and figure out a way to bring young boys, young men, on a rites of passage trip to Ghana." Talk about your son. Say his name and what happened with him, and how we should be addressing not only the violence that comes from official sources, the police department and law enforcement, but the violence that we unleash on each other as well. What are your thoughts?
Right. His death was surrounded around violence. His roommate had a girlfriend and he was beating her, and my son was raised, in a home with women and folks that were respectable and didn't beat each other. And he resisted that. And consequently, the roommate hired somebody to kill him. My son was on his way to work. And I often say if the young man had been going to work, he wouldn't have killed my son, or to school. So it's so important that we realize, and he was an activist. He was loved by the community. I mean, 1,000 people turned out in the snowstorm and shut the street down and marched him down the street because he was so loved. And there are people from all walks of life. I say often at these funerals, you learn more about your people than you know on an everyday basis. But yeah, this senseless killing has to stop. There's a brother on Facebook the other night, and he was enraged. He said, "I don't care about you young folks, all this craziness. You're not going to kill me. And stop killing our good brothers out here doing the work, that are activists, that are sacrificing themselves." But it's really interesting how Black men are feeling. I was talking to a sister the other day, and her son had been murdered as well. And she said, but he was really ready to go on to a better place. And I said, my son had mentioned that before to me too. He was so tired of the oppression of being a young Black man in America, fighting the white man, fighting his own people, and I said, I think my son was at peace too, which I'd never heard anybody else say. And I had thought about that. But yes, we have to bring our youth back into our bosom and hug them and kiss them and let them know that we're there for them, because they feel so isolated. So many of them are fatherless. Their fathers are dead or in prison. Like, my son he's got 2 sons. And so, we have to bring these youth back to our community and show them the love and let them know that they're important. And I always ask the youth when I work with them, what do you want to be? And I said, don't tell me about the money. I don't care about that. Whatever you want to be, just say it. And a lot of them say doctors, a lot of them say lawyers, dentists. I mean, it's amazing. I said, now you say that and you believe that and you can do that, and we'll help you do that. And that's what we've got to do. Like Chantel, they're taking youth on these tours with the Black colleges. People don't realize that, and I don't even know if it's this high, only 3% of our Black professionals come out of white institutions with BAs. Historically Black colleges, which we still have 100 of them at least, educate our community. Most of our Black professionals are coming out of Black colleges. So what can we do to support the institutions that are educating them, bringing them back to the community?
We're down to 30 seconds. Well, this time goes so fast. What a wonderful conversation. Let me just say thanks to Dr. Benjamin Chavis. Thanks to Dr. Thomas Nins. Thank you, Chantel Allen. Thank you, Yoji Senna, joining us from Brazil. And thank you, Sister Rosemary Williams. Thank you for listening. We're going to be here every day, tomorrow, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. I think the Thursday program might not be broadcast on KFAI, but we're going to be here. Wayne's going to be here. Wayne, take us out. Thank you all. We'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you.